Good morning. Kim Hammer, pastor, Saline Baptist Church down Tull, your morning devotion. Pick up in Genesis chapter 42 and verse 21 just to kind of lay the groundwork for today. Reuben having to deal with all the situation going on with the brothers coming back up before Joseph, and as they were dealing with all the back and forth, Reuben threw out there one of those "I told you so." Reuben remembered back whenever it was that Joseph was thrown in the pit and that he advocated on his behalf, but his brothers outvoted him, and threw him in the pit. He got sold to go down to Egypt. And now in the midst of all this that's going on, and it's bringing back the memories of what happened, Reuben, the oldest brother, is the one that says, "I told you so." We never want to find ourselves in a position in life where somebody has to say to us because of our actions, "I told you so." And if we don't like hearing those words, then whatever we do with our life and the actions that we choose to take with our life, let it not be such that one day somebody would be able to say to us, "I told you so," because we weren't willing to listen to wise counsel. Now, he goes on, and it goes on in chapter 42 and verse 28 and says, "What is this that God has done to us?" And this is where I think that the brothers are beginning to really experience the remorse of their guilt of what they did to their brother Joseph, and that they sold him into bondage, as they now realize that maybe God is using this as a form of punishment. Probably up till then, they'd been pretty content to deny, their actions were wrong. The family tension was probably pretty tight, because how could you go by a day working around each other, living around each other, being around each other, and not think about what it was that you did with each other to one of your own? And so they look at what is happening as, why is God doing this to us? Well, God's doing it partly to punish them, but he is also doing it in order to show them how great and wonderful and forgiving he is as the story plays out. So in chapter 42 and verse 38, Jacob, Israel's dug in, and he's saying, "You're not going to go back down there." And the boys had come back, minus Simeon, who got left because that was Joseph's kind of bargaining chip, if you would, to get Benjamin back up there, and hopefully eventually one day Jacob, his daddy. And so they come back, they've got the food, but the food runs out. And Jacob's dug in, he says, "I'm not going to go." The boys replay the story to him about what it was that Joseph said, and Jacob is dug in. He's not going to let any of his boys go back up there. He's going to cut his losses, which, if I was Simeon and I could hear the discussion back home, that might be a little bit discouraging, that he was viewed as expendable. But yet Jacob was where he was, and he was just trying to protect Benjamin, the youngest one, who they wanted to go up there. Now, there is contention that's going on in the family while all this discussion is happening. You got Reuben, who said, "I told you so," and didn't I tell you we shouldn't have done it in the first place, or we wouldn't be where we are now. You got Simeon, who got left back with Joseph, so he's probably wondering, well, where are you guys? It didn't take that long to get down there, to get the silver that you took with you, and get the youngest boy and get back here. So he was kind of sitting there wondering what was going on. And you got Judah, who's arguing with his dad, telling him to take Benjamin. And what's interesting is that Simeon, Reuben, and Judah are all the sons born to Jacob of Leah. This is the oldest of group of the boys of the 12, and they are the ones that are carrying the weight of the discussion. I don't know if that's by coincidence, but I think it's notable that the three sons born to Leah, who Jacob was not supposed to be married to in the first place because he served for Rachel, but he got Leah first, that they are the ones that are all in the mix of the conversation. Now, Jacob goes on, he asks his son, he said, "Why did you tell the man that you had a brother?" And their response was interesting. They said, "Well, because he talked to us like he knew us. He asked about did we have a younger brother? He asked, was our daddy still alive? He asked a lot of things that revealed that he had personal insight into our family. And what were we supposed to do, lie?" And Jacob basically said, "Yeah, it'd been better for you to lie than to rat out that the fact that I've got a younger brother." And that's not right either. But that just goes to show you how convoluted a situation can get. And it's kind of like, you hear the old expression, one lie leads to a bigger lie to a bigger lie. That's how all this happened, was because when they sold Joseph into bondage, went back and told their daddy that he had been tore up by a wild beast, which is referenced later in chapter 43, that is still exactly what Jacob thinks happens to Joseph. Then they had to tell another lie on top of it, and it just never stops. So the lesson is, don't tell a lie, because you'll have to tell a bigger lie after that. Not to mention the confusion and the heartache and the sorrow that one little lie could lead to as we see in the case of dealing with Jacob and his sons and Joseph. But they questioned him, or he questioned them like he knew them, of which he did, because these were his brothers and he knew all their dark and dirty secrets. But he had mellowed over the years. Now remember, he got sold into bondage at 17. He started serving the Pharaoh as second command at 30. There was 7 years of famine, and 7 years of feast, and somewhere in the 7 years of famine is when Jacob's boys came to Joseph. So there was plenty of time, for them to forget what he looked like, but also a lot of time for them to think about their actions. Now, I say that to say this. Joseph had a long time to think about how his brothers had treated him, but he saw enough evidences of the sign of God to believe that if God wanted him out of the situation, he could deliver him from the situation. But because he was still in the situation that his brothers created in leading him to be in bondage, he came around to accept the fact that God has me here for a purpose. And there's a lesson in that for us today. If we're in a situation where it appears like we're in bondage, it may be actually where God wants us to deliver us from the bondage we're afraid of, but it has to be done in his time because his timing is perfect. Now we find that as the story goes on, they bring gifts back up to Joseph. They bring back the original silver that they took up there and they sent back with them and they found in the bags. They doubled that, sent back that silver, so they're paying twice, plus they sent other gifts from the land, and they sent Benjamin back up there as well. And when they arrive, we find that Joseph makes a big feast for them, and while they're sitting around wondering because this was so out of character, not what they expected, and Joseph had removed himself from them, and Simeon had been brought back to them because the servant that was in the room with them, and they said, hey, tell us what's going on, because we didn't, that silver that we brought back with us, and then we doubled up the load, that first silver we didn't intend to take. We didn't even know it was in there till we got down the road. And here's what the servant said to him in chapter 43, verse 23. He said, it's all right. Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your fathers, has given you treasure in your sack. Now, through all of this, I think maybe one of the things that was to be achieved by God was that God wanted the Egyptian people to see how his people could be. And in doing so, God's name would get glorified in the midst of people who worship other idols and did not have any respect for the God of Israelites. But because of this, as it was playing out before their eyes, the servant that was appointed to Joseph was telling Joseph's brothers, calm down, it's all right. The God of your fathers. You see, God, in the midst of what we don't understand, can still be shown to be the God of all understanding.